morning. On our daily walk, Nico and I take various routes, and there's one particular street we often go down. And partway down that street is a house. It's a little bit run down, but often on the veranda, the front veranda, rugged up well against the winter cold at the moment, is an older woman. And she's often sitting there and we'll wave and keep walking. And then I realise that she's also hooked up to what seems to be an oxygen cylinder. She's got the tube into her nose and she's breathing the oxygen. And then as she waved one day, I noticed in her hand was a cigarette. And it seemed to me that the very thing that was causing the disease that her body was suffering from was the thing that she craved most. And she gave herself to. In continuing to smoke, her condition was no doubt exacerbated. And it's often the case that the thing we crave, the addiction we have, contributes not to our well-being, but the very opposite. It makes life tougher. It contributes to ill health, or lack of relationships, or exclusions. I remember talking to a young man who came in for some support, some help. And we sat and talked, and I gave him some food and organised some groceries. And we just talked a while, had a coffee. And he shared something of his story. He'd been a drug addict. And he was doing his best to get off it. He's been through rehab and he was staying off it. He was on methadone and whatever else. And he talked a little bit. I asked him, I said, what was it like? This is horrible. It was horrible. I knew how bad it was for me. But I'd wake up in a sweat and the only thing I could think of was getting drugs to make the feeling go away. And I would do anything to get the money to buy the drugs. I would rip off family and friends. I would steal. I even, one day, the worst thing I did was, well, in my mind, was hock my guitar. This guitar that someone had given me, it was precious to me. The only thing I owned that was precious. But I was so desperate, I hocked it. The very thing that made his life a misery was the thing he craved and addicted. And it's like that for all of us. Things that we crave and addicted to are often the things that cause our life to spin out of control or make us feel upset or anxious or whatever. And this week in Luke's story, Jesus is invited to the house of a prominent Pharisee for a dinner party, a celebration of some sort. And it's a Sabbath day. And when you get the Sabbath day and Jesus and a Pharisee and food together, you know anything could happen. And it does. He turns up and there's a man with dropsy. I didn't know what dropsy was. I mean, I've heard the term, but I looked it up and it's about edema, swelling in limbs or part of your body. And, you know, sometimes it's often associated with things like congestive heart failure, and it can be very serious. But in the ancient world, it was recognised as an illness of the well-off, the well-to-do, of greed and wealth. Galen, who was a 2nd century physician, describes Rome. He said, Rome is a populous city, and any day you could find 10,000 people suffering from jaundice and 10,000 people suffering from dropsy. Suffering from poverty and impoverishment and hunger are those who live the high life and are suffering from that. It was a disease of those who are well off. And the healing is quite significant because Jesus asked the gathered guests, or the Pharisees, is it okay to heal on the Sabbath day? Knowing full well what their answer is, because he's just healed a woman in the synagogue and been taken to task by the leader of the synagogue, who understands these laws in a very rigid way. But the Pharisees don't answer, they just ignore him, probably sensing that argument is just not going to get them anywhere. He's going to do it anyway. And so he says to the man, you you are free to leave this. You can leave. He heals him and you're free to leave. But the Greek word is a bit more complex. It's you're free to leave this sickness. You're free to leave this sick place. It's not quite clear. Does he mean he's free to leave the sickness of dropsy, or this place where he is, which is a sick place? You see, dropsy is not really, it's the symptom of the illness. The illness is status quo, is living the high life, is giving into wealth and prosperity and living it up, of attending these parties and gutsing yourself on wine and rich food. That's what's believed. That's what the heart of this is. You're free to leave this way of life. You're free to leave this way that will make you sick. You're free to find life in all its fullness. And then he watches as the guests arrive, and they take the seats of honour, the best seats, the seats closest to the front perhaps. And as he's watching, he says to them, look, when you're invited to a party like this, don't take the seats of honour, but sit towards the back. And then when the host comes and sees you sitting there, he might say, hey, friend, you shouldn't be there. Come up the front and you will be honoured before everyone. But if you sit in the best seats and someone more important than you comes, you'll be asked to leave and shifted back to the front, and you'll be dishonoured. And in their society, an honour-shame society, which is much deeper in their awareness of shame and honour than we in our more individualised society in the West, this was a deeply troubling thing. If you were to be removed from a seat of honour and placed down here, to be dishonoured, you would lose all face. It would be the most awful, more than embarrassing. It would be cutting. It would cut the legs out from under you. You would be so dishonoured. Jesus then turns to the host and says, when you throw a party like this, don't invite the well-off, the well-to-do, the powerful, the rich, those who you think will invite you to one of their parties. Don't invite people to kind of suck up to them so that they'll invite you to something they throw. But rather, invite the outcasts and the street people and the beggars and the poor. Those who can't repay you. And you will be rewarded in the kingdom of heaven. And then on the surface, Jesus seems to be offering social cues to people to get better off. If you want to be honoured, don't sit at the best seats, sit at the worst ones, and the host will make you look really good, Or don't throw parties for all the rich people that can invite you back. Throw it for the down and outs, and God will really bless you. But that's not what it's about. What Jesus is doing is turning the system of the world upside down. Like with that man with the dropsy, you're free to leave all this. You're free to walk away from this status-seeking life, this way of life which invests in wealth or prosperity or well-to-do or honour and looking good and imbibing in that life which is killing you. What he paints for them is a picture where there is no exclusion. Because these parties for the wealthy were about those who had getting more, and those who don't have being excluded even further. And Jesus' way was to invite people into this reign of God, which was for everyone. Where there weren't those who were really well off and suffered the sickness of the well off, and those who were really poor who suffered the sickness and the disease of those who were poor. It was about coming together and sharing life together in all its fullness and wonder. There's a story I read of a couple getting married. and they were part of a church, and he was one of the pastors, and worked with a whole range of people. And they had lots of friends and lots of connections, and they wanted this big wedding, and they wanted to invite everyone, but they couldn't because no one would hold the place, and it was too expensive. So in the end, they were able to get the whole block blocked off, and they threw this great street party. And anyone and everyone was welcome. And so there was these homeless people that the pastor had been working with. They came. And then the leader of them was there in his t-shirt and his jeans that had holes in the knees. And he was dancing away with those who were dressed up in suits. And there was this African-American neighbour who was living up with the white people, and all the mix of culture and race and high end and low end and poverty and wealth all gathered together. And they danced and they sang and they celebrated together this wedding. And it was a joyous celebration. And I think that's what the reign of God is about. It's about us together in this world, sharing life together. So there's no us and them, no rich and poor, no in and out, included and excluded, where there's no vying and competition for spaces of honour, that every place is a seat of honour, because we're guests of this God who loves us all. And we're all children of this God who loves us all. This is the vision that Jesus has for us and for our world. And when we live into it, we find life in a deeper, more profound way. And we welcome people into this way of belonging, this community of inclusive love, of grace. And it's not about us, because everything we have and all we are is a gift of grace from God to be shared with the world, to bring life and hope for everyone. What can you do this week that maybe expresses something of this love and grace in our world? A way that makes a difference.